Hey guys, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Peruvian model of 1935, a really well-made Mauser with some interesting features that is not well known. Now before we get into the model of 1935, we need to go back into history with Peru a little bit, and we're going to start with their first Mauser, which is the model of 1891, which is in 7.65. You know, it's pretty much the first Mauser rifle that hits the widely sort of commercial market. Now the Peruvian 1931 is almost identical to the Argentine. Most people are probably going to think that all kind of Peruvians should have the roller coaster, the longa vizier rear sight. But at first it didn't have that. The roller coaster rear sight was added to the Peruvian 1891 around 1912. Now later on the Peruvians do get the model of 1909 here. This one was made by Mauser Obendorf. It's widely known for having the longa vizier roller coaster rear sight to it. It's again in 7.65. It's kind of interesting, has that tall charger bridge in the back. Beautiful crest and everything. It's pretty neat. It's pretty much just a Gewehr 98 export model. So this is what the Peruvians had. Now fast forward in the 1930s, Peru is updating their military, and of course within that they're looking for a new rifle. So they actually turn to CZ. They buy the VZ model of 1932. Which is kind of an interesting rifle. They didn't buy very many of them, and they actually didn't keep very many of them. That whole shipment of rifles, they ended up just forwarding straight to Bolivia, because Bolivia was in the Chaco War. That's a really interesting war. It's actually the deadliest conflict in South America in the 20th century. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died, tens of thousands of civilians. It's quite the bloody conflict that not a lot of people know about here in the United States. So all those VZ-32s went to Bolivia and kind of lost, and in attrition in the war and everything like that. So it's kind of interesting. They adopt it, send it all away, but they kept a couple. There's a couple like samples or like parts builds that they kept for themselves, and those guns had a few interesting features which they really seemed to like. But now in 1934, Peru now needs more rifles. They're like, well, we bought some and we gave them all away, now we need some more. So they actually hold trials. They get FN, they get CZ, and they get Mauser Obendorf to compete in these trials. For whatever reason, a lot of military trials aren't exactly fair. And for whatever happened, FN actually ended up winning that trial, which is kind of interesting because they were so proud of their 1909. They got Mauser original, on the receiver ring and everything, and then they go with FN for their new rifle. But FN won the contract in 1934. They Peru sends a purchasing delegation to FN to kind of oversee. It was like the first of many delegations to FN to kind of oversee the purchasing and the features and everything like that. And that's what they end up, buying a rifle from them. Now it was in 1935, of course, when this rifle gets selected and adopted. FN actually even calls it the 1935, as well as the Peruvians, and that's what we have here. Now Peru didn't just order the short rifles here. This short rifle has about a 23-inch barrel. They also ordered carbines that had much shorter barrels. But for whatever reason, they didn't order hardly any of those carbines, and the number's not widely known. They did order about 30,000 of these short rifles. Now it's kind of interesting that the short rifle is the rifle, and then the carbine is the carbine, where like a lot of other countries like Brazil, like the long rifle was the rifle and the short rifle was the carbine. So it's really just seems kind of up to personal preference on what people called the rifles, which is kind of makes it a little bit interesting for collectors nowadays to kind of classify something based on our nomenclature or the nomenclature of the time. But anyway, Peru actually ordered 30,000 of these 1935 short rifles. They ordered an unknown amount of the carbines. I don't know why that's not known, but the carbines are a lot less common than these 1935s. These 1935s aren't exactly common either, especially in the original 7.65. Now let's get in and do some close-ups, and I'll show you some really interesting features of this 1935. So here's two examples of 7.65 1935 Peruvians that I just happen to have. So both of these are still in the original 7.65, and this kind of gives you an idea the sort of overall condition and everything of these. You know, you'll find little bit of, you know, little chips and a lot of dings and stuff like that. This one has more of like a dull wood finish, where this one has a little bit more of a shine to it, like a reddish shine to it. I really like the wood on this one, but just to kind of give you an overall, you know, picture of what the collecting market kind of looks like for these. So obviously, both the short rifles and the carbines have turned down bolt handles, but if I kind of turn this one up for you, you'll see that it's flattened. The underside of the bolt face is flattened and it's knurled. It's sort of like a K98A or K98AZ. It's knurled. I really like this. You know, there's no stock inlet for the bolt handle, so the flattened bolt handle kind of helps your hand get underneath it, and the knurling kind of helps with the purchase. You know, keeps your hand from slipping off the bolt handle. I really love this design on bolt action rifles. I think it's really neat. It'd be good. Maybe just a stock inlet would be the only thing that you could kind of improve this, but they sort of make up for it with the flattening and knurling. You can see pretty prominently up here this sort of extended stripper clip guide. That's just something that just kind of has to happen with this older, you know, 7.65 and stripper clip system. The one neat thing about the 1935 is that because the stripper clip guide is so tall, you don't need that little arm that comes over from the ejector box. The ejector box is just a, you know, completely separate piece. Has nothing to do with the feeding, which I really like this. This is probably the best 7.65 feeding system out there. It's about as good as you can get for that old system. Another thing to point out about these Peruvian 1935s, I'm going to go ahead and cock the rifle now, is that you'll notice that the flag safety is over here on the right side. Which, if you know your Mausers, you know that is kind of the opposite. So right is fire, up is, you know, up like on all Mausers, but left now is safe. So when the flag safety is over on the left side, you know, the action is locked and you can't pull the trigger. So that's kind of one of the neat things about the Peruvian 1935. It's one of the things I really like, sort of, you know, how unique and different it is because of this. So 1935s are set up so that they can have a side sling or an undersling sling orientation. If you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of the side sling orientation, so that's kind of neat, at least that it gives you both options. Now when we move back, we know that normally on Mauser rifles you would have a sling attachment on the underside and on the side, because if you have the sling on the side, it needs to stay on the side. Well, with the Peruvian 1935, that's a little different here. Instead, you just have a single sling attachment point on the underside. However, this sling attachment point can rotate. It can spin. It doesn't spin, you know, a full 360 degrees. It just spins over, which when it spins in this direction, the sling would then go left so that it could go and attach to the side sling here. So it's just sort of a neat little quirk of this gun, that it just has a single rear sling attachment point, and that it just pivots a little bit to kind of, you know, use a side sling. Probably not the perfect side sling method, but at least it keeps, you know, the side of your gun clean, you know, clear of anything. I don't know, there's got to be some pros and cons to that I'm just not super privy to right now, but that's just, well, again, one of the neat features of the 1935. There are grasping grooves on the Peruvian 1935, of course. Not very many Mausers made by FN. I think maybe this and the Colombian, maybe one more, are the only ones that have these grasping grooves. Kind of personal preference, I kind of like them. I can live without them though, but I think it's just another neat little feature and a nice little touch, a little extra that they did on these. Now the butt plates on these 1935 Peruvians are this kind of corrugated flat butt plate style. The Peruvian 1935 was the first to actually have this corrugated style. You do find this on later FN style rifles. It's just sort of originated here with the Peruvian, which is just kind of neat. Again, something to look out for on your Peruvians. Apologize in advance for this. This is very hard to get on camera and to focus. If you can make out the trigger here, there's actually some checkering that it's done on the trigger here. So it actually catches your finger, sort of like when it goes in the up-down motion, but not so much left and right. But again, that's just kind of another little extra that I don't know on too many Mausers that have this feature. And it's just kind of adding up to kind of one of those spared no expense sort of Mausers. Now, I'm a big fan of protected front sights on Mauser rifles. I think it's just a must-have on your Mauser rifle. And again, it's another feature that's on the Peruvian 1935 here. You can see these protected front sights. There's little holes in it so that you can actually, use a punch and you can drift the front sight blade kind of left and right for windage. But it's a good feature to have on here. The sight wings or little protective ears here, they're not really that massive. They don't stick up very far. Again, and they have this kind of nice little bend where they almost go perpendicular to the front sight blade, which is kind of nice. It'd be hard to mistake these little ears probably for the front sight. And they do protect, the front sight from any droppages or anything like that. So, and it's not my favorite front sight ever, but at least the rifle has one. Now here on the left side, you can see just the standard Fabrique Nationale kind of roll mark that they put on all of the FN Contract Mausers. At least most of them will have that marking. And then you have just the serial number there on the left side of the receiver. And that's kind of, there's not a whole lot of serial numbers on these, kind of like most FN Contract guns. The serial numbers to look for is right there on the receiver ring. There are some kind of on the back side of this handle. So the serial number is just right there on the back side of the handle. And then down here on the butt plate, there's the serial number right there. So, not too many, just kind of like most of these FN guns. There's just not very many serial numbers on them, but that's the three main ones there, just the receiver, the bolt, and the stock. And last but not least, the receiver rings on these 1935s, they do have a really nice, beautiful Peruvian crest. Again, here's a couple examples just to kind of show you the general level of wear and everything that you'll find on these. The facts are a lot of these South American guns tended to get really used for decades. And so, by the time these end up, in your collection, you're going to be kind of worn, so you're going to kind of have to look out for that. This one seems pretty worn off, like the crest here isn't very deep. It's a little bit deeper on this one, so some collectors I know get kind of picky about that, and I can kind of see why. You kind of want a nice crest example in your collection, but again, just really beautiful crests. Now in the 1950s, Peru, with the assistance of FN, they actually go about converting their original 7.65 1935 to 30-06. And that's what this is here. This is a converted 1935 into 30-06. They did about 80% of the total stockpile of their 7.65 rifles. So you could say it's about 24,000 of their 1935 short rifles were converted into 30-06. So most of the 1903s that you find will be the 30-06 version, because you can do the math. It's only about 6,000 that remained in the original 7.65. So really kind of the value of these can kind of depend on what caliber they're in, and of course condition. The condition on these tends to vary. It seems to me like the ones that are converted into 30-06 are a little bit nicer. Maybe when they were redone, they were refinished or something, but they're quite interesting. There's only a couple things that they did to these guns to really convert them, but let's get in and I'll show you some close-ups of the 30-06 one. So here's a close-up of the 30-06 conversion of the 1935. I mean, this is pretty much identical for just a couple things as the 7.65 one, as we'll get into. So first off, you'll notice that this receiver looks a lot darker than the other ones. That's because these were refinished. Most of these were blued. This one, however, was painted. This is the same exact black paint that the Belgians used on their, the Belgian model of 1935. The guns were parked and then painted. This is a really heavy-duty black enamel paint that's I mean, I kind of like the idea of using this because of how hardy it is. Now, it's not quite as beautiful as like bluing, but utilitarian-wise, I think this is a pretty good choice. So that's kind of why it's that sort of dark color, and you know, of course, ignore the highlighting. So just like basically most or all 30-06 conversion Mausers, you'll see this little notch that was cut into the receiver. Another example of a rifle with this same notch are the Norwegian K98Ks that were converted to 30-06. And that's because 30-06 is 7.62 by 63. Just overall, it's just a longer cartridge than this receiver is set up for. So they have to have this notch. So that's one of the things you'll see. And then back here on the receiver bridge, it's a .30, and that is the, you know, just it's 30 caliber essentially. Just the marking for 30-06 is .30. And that's sort of just the caliber designation, just to kind of, I guess, to let the soldier know if he has one of these that it's not a regular 7.65 version. And that is pretty much it. That's the main differences really between this, you know, 7.65 to 30-06 conversion process. You know, it's the same bolt, same knurling and everything, but just kind of overall, the gun is in slightly kind of nicer condition. You know, or at least it looks better with this kind of black enamel paint on the parts. It's pretty nice. Again, here on the stock, you'll kind of see that the stock number was redone. So it's kind of interesting. The first one was a little bit lower, and it was sort of edged over during the the refurb or conversion process of these guns. And then the new number was placed on top of that. So that's just something you'll run across, these 30-06 conversion guns. Peruvian 1935 in 7.65. We have Argentine manufactured original military 7.65 in here. We'll see how it works. The weird thing with the Peruvians is that the safety left is safe and right's fire. So that feels a little opposite, but let's see if these rounds shoot and get an overall impression of the recoil and handling of the Peruvian. Hey, it worked. Not bad. Recoil's not bad at all. Okay, gotta beat that closed. I don't know if the gun's dirty or out of spec or something, or if the ammo is out of spec or something, but you really kind of have to beat it closed. Yeah, not the smoothest operating with that Argentine ammo, but the gun itself, you know, is smooth and everything just fine. 7.65. The recoil feels a little bit more like 7mm Magnum or 7mm Mauser or something like that. Not super harsh. Let's shoot the 30-06 through it and see how that feels in comparison. I kind of have a feeling it's going to kick quite a bit more. All right, and the 30-06, that loaded and felt a lot smoother than the 7.65. Let's see how it feels. Yeah, that kicks a little more. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. So you had to beat the bolt closed on the 30-06 and the 7.65 version. So that kind of makes me think it's maybe not the individual rifle or ammo, or I'm not sure. I mean, this is a conversion. If anything, you expect this to not work as well as the original. Huh. I feel like this is an example of a Mauser that functions about as well as a Mosin, where you have to beat the bolt closed on it. Okay, last round. You know, you're firing a big boy cartridge with this. Not as nice. It's not as nice as a 7mm or whatever. Of course, just 30-06 kicking more. Operationally though, you know, just fine. Other than the little bolt stickiness closing. That's odd. I don't really know why that's happening. Don't know if it's a headspace issue. I haven't headspaced these, so maybe it's that. I don't know. It's a little odd. Now, most of the Peruvian 1935s were surplused and sold. You know, a lot of these are in the United States today, so they're not exactly rare, but they're pretty uncommon. You just don't really run across them that often, especially in the original 765. So I'd recommend if you see one in the original 765, pick it up. I know some people would kind of rather have the 30-06 version because, you know, you can get that ammo a lot easier. But I recommend picking one of these up if you find them because they're not super common. Peru actually still maintains quite a few, an unknown number of 1935s in their country. So, I mean, with only 30,000 short rifles made, them keeping how many of them and they converted and everything, who knows exactly how many is in the United States, but I mean, compared to numbers like, you know, the K90AK production numbers and whatever, not very many of these 1935s are made, and they're a really interesting rifle with a lot of neat features that I really like. I mean, it has just about all the features that I love in a rifle. And I know it's kind of weird. I know this is like the fourth 1935 Mauser that I've done. When you say like a 1935 Mauser, most people think of like the Chilean, but as you guys have seen, this is the fourth one now. There's the Chilean 1935, the Brazilian 1935, the Belgian 1935, and now the Peruvian 1935. And I think that's all of them now. So, so you didn't read that wrong or anything. It really is. There just happens to be that many 1935s. So it's pretty neat. And of course, being so close to World War II, you know, the production kind of for a lot of these guns got cut off and stuff like that. So maybe not so much with the Peruvian 1935, but other 1935s. But it's just a fascinating thing. I like the 1935 Mausers for some reason, so I've always just kind of wanted to collect all of them, which I guess I did that now. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. If you like this kind of stuff, let me know. That's the only way I know if you want me to keep making stuff like this. I have an idea for next time. I'm looking forward to the video that I'm going to make next time. So I guess I have to ask you to subscribe. That's a thing now. So thank you for subscribing, and I will see you next time.